AITA for questioning my son's paternity after he removed my name from his family tree? I'm Jasper, 34. Until a few months ago, I thought my biggest problem was a marriage that had gone quiet. Alyssa and I had been together long enough for our relationship to run mostly on routines. Sunday mornings meant pancakes. Weeknights meant laundry folded on the couch, while some show played that neither of us was really watching. Our arguments were rarely about anything important at first. A coffee mug left in the sink could somehow become a conversation about respect, effort, and who had stopped trying first. Then we would go silent for 2 or 3 days, exchange practical texts about groceries and school pickup, and eventually act normal again without resolving anything. Leo was 6. He called me Dad. He came to my side of the bed when he had nightmares because, according to him, Alyssa asked too many questions while I just lifted the blanket. He left toy cars in my shoes and got offended when I made grilled cheese without cutting it into 4 triangles. Squares taste different, he once told me with complete seriousness. Leo had never felt like a question to me. He felt like my kid. That mattered, because what happened next wasn't about me suddenly deciding 6 years of fatherhood meant nothing. It was about learning that nearly every adult around me had used my love for him to keep me obedient. The dinner where things started to crack was at Evelyn's house. Evelyn was Alyssa's mother, and family dinners at her place had the same rhythm every time. She cooked too much food, complained that no one ate enough, and watched everyone closely enough to know who was upset before they admitted it. Reed was there, as usual. He was Alyssa's old family friend, though family friend never fully covered it. He had known her since they were teenagers. He knew where Evelyn kept the serving spoons. He walked into the house without knocking. He had stories about Alyssa's childhood that always seemed to make everyone laugh while I sat there waiting for someone to explain the context. I've known this family forever, he used to say. I'm basically furniture. For years, I had tried to accept that. That night, Leo was sitting between Alyssa and me, eating mashed potatoes one careful bite at a time. Reed said something about how Leo got quiet when he was concentrating. Quentin, Alyssa's older brother, laughed. That's Reed's exact thinking face. Same squint and everything. The table went still for half a second. It was so brief I might have ignored it if Alyssa hadn't reacted. Stop saying that like it's funny, she snapped. Nobody had even looked at me yet. Then she turned toward me and added, he has your eyes. I raised both hands. I didn't say anything. Quentin smirked over his glass. You always need a receipt for being dad or something? Leo looked up from his plate. What receipt? Nothing, buddy, I said. Eat your dinner. Evelyn immediately asked him about school. Reed stared at his plate. Alyssa's hand stayed tight around her fork. I let the moment pass because my son was at the table, but it stayed with me. The truth was, people had commented on Leo looking like Reed before. It wasn't constant and never direct enough to justify a confrontation. It was little things. The eyebrows. The way his smile pulled higher on one side. The expression he made when he was confused. Once, when Leo was 3, Reed held him at a cookout and someone said, that could be your kid. Everyone laughed too loudly. I laughed too, because I didn't want to be the insecure husband who couldn't take a joke. Alyssa had kissed my cheek afterward and said, don't get weird. He has your eyes. It became her answer to everything. When I asked why Reed always gave Leo more expensive gifts than the other children in the family, she said I was jealous. When I asked why Reed had shown up at a pediatric appointment I thought was supposed to be just Alyssa and Leo, she told me he had driven them because her car was making a noise. When I asked why Evelyn always corrected people who said Leo looked like me, Alyssa accused me of turning a sweet moment into an investigation. Decent husbands don't look at their own sons like evidence, she said once. That line worked on me for years. I didn't want to be suspicious. I didn't want to become the kind of man who demanded passwords, checked phones, and treated every friendship as a threat. So whenever something felt wrong, I blamed myself for noticing. A week after the dinner, Leo came home with a folded sheet of paper covered in crayon leaves. He dropped his backpack by the front door and ran to the kitchen for a snack. I picked up the paper because it had fallen halfway out of his folder. It was a family tree worksheet. At the top, the teacher had written, "The people who make my family." Leo had drawn Alyssa with yellow hair, even though her hair was brown. He had drawn himself wearing a cape. Evelyn was a purple stick figure with huge glasses. In the box labeled Dad, my name was written in pencil. Jasper. A line had been drawn through it lightly, then darkened. Underneath was the letter R. Most of the rest had been erased, but the paper was smudged and thin in that spot. I stared at it long enough for Leo to notice. "That's mine," he said, reaching for it. "I know." I crouched so we were eye level. "It looks good." "Who's the R?" His face changed. Not fear exactly. More like the look he got when he thought there might be a wrong answer. "I messed up." "That's okay. Who were you going to write?" He shrugged and looked toward the hallway. "Grandma said I mixed up family words." My throat tightened. "What family words, buddy?" He picked at the edge of his shirt. "Dad words." Before I could ask anything else, Alyssa walked in. She looked at me, then at the paper in my hand. Her whole body sharpened. "Why are you going through his schoolwork?" It fell out of his bag. She crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and snatched it from me. "Alyssa." "He made a mistake. He's 6. I'm not blaming him." "You're interrogating him." I asked who the R was. Leo stood beside the counter, holding an unopened package of crackers. His eyes moved between us. I lowered my voice. "Go wash your hands, buddy. I'll open those in a minute." When he left, Alyssa folded the worksheet twice and shoved it into the trash. I reached in and pulled it back out. That was the moment her expression changed from anger to panic. "You are not turning a first-grade assignment into one of your episodes," she said. "My episodes?" "You know what I mean." "No, I don't." "You get insecure, and then everybody has to spend days reassuring you." I asked one question. "You asked our son if another man was his father." "I did not." "That's what you were doing." Her voice was still low, but her words came fast. I looked at the worksheet again. "Why would your mother talk to him about dad words?" "She probably didn't. He misunderstood." "Then why did you throw this away?" "Because I'm not letting you make him feel unwanted." That sentence landed exactly where she meant it to. I looked toward the hallway and saw Leo's shadow under the bathroom door. So I stopped. Not because I believed her, because he was listening. That night, after Leo was asleep, Alyssa went to bed without speaking to me. I sat in the living room with the worksheet on the coffee table. The longer I stared at the erased R, the more old moments started lining up. At parent-teacher night the year before, Alyssa had steered me away from the emergency contact table. "I already filled everything out," she had said. At a pediatric appointment, the nurse asked about family history, and Alyssa answered every question before I could speak. When I said my father had a heart condition, she interrupted. "They only need relevant history." Once, I had gotten a voicemail from Evelyn by mistake. She had meant to call Alyssa. Her message had been vague enough that I ignored it at the time. "Tell Reed not to worry. He's more involved than people know, and that should be enough for now." I had assumed they were talking about some family problem that had nothing to do with me. Now I wasn't sure. The next day, I called Julian from my car. He had been my closest friend for years and had never liked Alyssa's habit of turning every disagreement into a referendum on my character. Still, I expected him to tell me I was spiraling. Instead, he listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Do not go home and bleed all over the living room." "I'm not planning to." "You sound like you are." "I found another man's initial under my name on my son's family tree." "I heard you. That's why you need facts." I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. "What am I supposed to do? Ask her again so she can tell me I'm unstable?" "No. Stop arguing. Document what you already have. Get the school form. Save the worksheet. Find the voicemail. Then decide what you're willing to know." I didn't answer. Julian's voice softened. "You can love Leo and still need the truth. Those are not opposites." The idea of a DNA test made me feel sick. For 2 days, I told myself I wouldn't do it. Then Alyssa texted me from the other room after another silent evening. "You need to drop this before you damage him." Not, "You're wrong." Not, "Reed isn't his father." Just a warning that asking would cause damage. I ordered the test that night. The kit arrived in a plain package. I kept it hidden and followed every instruction exactly. I hated myself while I did it. I felt like I was betraying Leo, even though he would never know. When I mailed it, I sat in my car outside the shipping store for almost an hour. I remember thinking, please let me be crazy. For once, let them be right about me. The result came by email 11 days later. It was after midnight. Alyssa was asleep. Leo's lunchbox was drying beside the sink, and one of his sneakers was lying on its side near the back door. I opened the report at the kitchen table. The language was clinical. The tested man is excluded as the biological father of the tested child. I read it once. Then again. Then I scrolled down as if the bottom of the page might explain that they had made a mistake. The house didn't change. The refrigerator kept humming. The clock above the stove kept ticking. A cartoon magnet Leo had made was still holding up the grocery list. My life ended in a room that looked completely normal. I didn't cry right away. I sat there until my hands went numb. The first thing I felt wasn't anger. It was fear. Not fear of losing Alyssa. Fear of losing Leo. I pictured him waking up and running into the kitchen. I pictured him asking for pancakes. I pictured some lawyer or judge reducing 6 years of scraped knees, bedtime stories, doctor visits, and school drop-offs to a line on a laboratory report. Then the anger came. Not at him. Never at him. At Alyssa. I woke her at 2 in the morning, but I didn't confront her. I asked for the password to our old external drive because I said I needed tax records. She barely opened her eyes. It's the same as always. That was the first mistake she made after I knew. The second was assuming I would explode instead of look. I spent the next several days gathering records. I requested a copy of Leo's school emergency contact form. Reed was listed as an approved pickup person. My name was there too, but Reed's authorization had been added later in Alyssa's handwriting. I found old birthday cards in a storage box. Most were normal. One from Reed said, "To our little champ, I'll always be in your corner." Another said, "You're growing into such a great little man. Proud of you every day. Our little champ." I searched bank records and found small transfers from Reed to Alyssa around Leo's birthdays, a dental procedure, and the start of the school year. The amounts were never huge, $200, $300, sometimes $500. The notes were vague. For Leo. School stuff. Help with appointment. I also found the voicemail from Evelyn still saved in an old backup. This time, I listened to the whole thing. Tell Reed not to worry. He deserves to know his son too, but Jasper can't be pushed. He's more involved than people know, and that should be enough for now. I played it 3 times. Then I found messages. Alyssa had deleted most of her older conversations, but backups had preserved fragments. One message to Evelyn read, "Jasper can never find out. He would leave." Evelyn replied, "Then stop giving him reasons to ask." Another exchange was from the week of parent-teacher night. Evelyn, keep Reed away from school this week. Jasper is asking questions. Alyssa, I know. And one message from Alyssa to Reed. No gifts with names this time. Please. There was no single dramatic confession. No paragraph explaining everything. There didn't need to be. The truth was in the coordination. This wasn't a single, frightened decision from 6 years ago. It was a system they had maintained every day since. I made copies of everything and stored them somewhere Alyssa couldn't access. Then I called a family lawyer. I didn't walk into that office asking how to destroy anyone. I asked what could happen to Leo. The lawyer listened, reviewed the DNA report, and asked careful questions about my role in Leo's life, the birth certificate, school records, financial support, and whether Reed had ever openly claimed paternity. I answered as clearly as I could. At one point, I said, "I don't want him taken away from me." The lawyer put down her pen. "Then do not make decisions from the wound," she said. "Make them from the record." She explained that the legal questions could become complicated and that I should not assume either the DNA result or my emotional role would automatically decide everything. She told me not to empty accounts, threaten anyone, block Alyssa from necessary funds, or send angry messages that could later be used against me. She recommended written communication, documentation, mediation, and a child counselor before any age-appropriate disclosure to Leo. I left with a folder of notes and a kind of cold clarity. That evening, Alyssa was putting leftovers into containers when I walked into the kitchen. "Leo asleep?" I asked. "Yes." Door closed. She looked at me. "Why?" "Because I'm not having this conversation where he can hear." Her face tightened. I placed a copy of the DNA report on the counter. She didn't touch it. For several seconds, she just stared at the first page. Then she said, "What did you do?" Not "this is wrong." Not "there must be a mistake." "What did you do?" I got one honest answer. "You tested him behind my back." "Yes." Her hand went to her mouth. You violated our family. I almost laughed, but nothing about it was funny. Do not use Leo to end this conversation. You're going to make him feel unwanted. I haven't said one word to him. You shouldn't have needed a test. You shouldn't have needed 6 years of lies. Her eyes filled. I was scared. That's not a timeline. Jasper. Is Reed his biological father? She looked away. I waited. Finally, she whispered, Probably. Probably. I never tested. But you knew it was possible. She sat down. The kitchen light made her look exhausted and older than she had that morning. It happened before our wedding. We were together. We were fighting. We were still together. I thought we were over. You came home that night and slept beside me. She flinched. I kept my voice low because Leo was upstairs. How long did it overlap? A few weeks. And your mother knew? She figured it out. Reed? He knew the timing. Quentin? He knew there had been something between us. I don't know what he believed. You put Reed on Leo's school pickup form. He helped sometimes. Without telling me. You were busy. You took money from him. It was for Leo. You let him act like a father in private while I carried the title in public. That's not fair. I stared at her. She covered her face with both hands. I thought you would leave, she said. You were right. Her head snapped up. I continued before she could speak. I am not making a final decision about Leo tonight. I am not fighting in front of him. I am not disappearing from his life because of what you did. Relief crossed her face too quickly. Then I said, but I am done pretending this marriage is intact. Her relief vanished. From that night on, I slept in the spare room. I moved communication about the betrayal to email and text. Every time Alyssa tried to pull me into a circular argument, I repeated the same thing. Put it in writing. She hated that. In conversation, she could cry, interrupt, accuse, and change the subject. In writing, the contradictions stayed visible. I froze non-essential spending from our joint account after speaking with the lawyer. I did not empty it. Household bills, groceries, school costs, and Leo's needs continued as normal. The anniversary trip Alyssa had been planning was canceled. It was supposed to be a week away, expensive enough that we had been saving for months. When the cancellation notice reached her email, she stormed into the spare room. You canceled it? Yes. You didn't even discuss it with me. You didn't discuss Leo's paternity with me. That money was for us. There is no us trip right now. You're punishing me. I am refusing to fund an anniversary performance while we prepare for mediation. She stood in the doorway, crying and furious. You're being cold. No, I said. I'm being clear. I sent Reed a certified letter drafted with legal guidance. It stated that any contact involving Leo had to be transparent and handled through appropriate channels. No private pickups. No side arrangements through Evelyn. No gifts passed secretly through Alyssa. He called me the day he received it. I let it go to voicemail. His message said, I didn't want to blow up anyone's life. I care about him. I just didn't know what my place was. I saved it. Then he texted. Can we talk man to man? I replied. You had 6 years to do that. Future communication goes through the agreed process. Evelyn called me cruel. She left a long message saying some truths did more harm than good, and that she had only tried to protect that little boy. I sent one text back. You protected the arrangement. Leo deserved the truth handled safely. I deserved the truth before raising another man's child under false pretenses. She replied almost immediately. A real father wouldn't need proof. I didn't answer. Quentin was less subtle. He called and started talking before I finished saying hello. You DNA tested your own kid and want everyone to clap. I didn't call you. Maybe everyone called you paranoid because you acted paranoid. You knew Reed sent money. Silence. Then he said, that doesn't mean anything. You knew about the gifts. He's close to the family. You knew Alyssa had been with him. That was years ago. You knew enough to laugh at me. He hung up. For almost 2 weeks, I kept my distance from Alyssa's family. I focused on Leo's routines. I packed his lunch. I drove him to school when it was my turn. I made pancakes on Sunday. When I needed space, I stayed with Julian for a night or two, but I called Leo at bedtime and came back before breakfast. Alyssa kept asking what I was going to do. I don't know yet, I told her. She heard that as a threat. It wasn't. It was the truth. Then she invited me to Evelyn's for dinner. She said the family needed to talk. I refused at first. There's nothing they can say that belongs at a dinner table. They think you're cutting everyone off. I'm setting boundaries. Please. For Leo. That phrase again. For Leo. They had used those two words to justify every lie. I agreed only after confirming that Leo would be staying with Julian for the evening. I was not going to let him sit through adults fighting over his identity. Before I left, I placed copies of the documents in a plain envelope. Julian saw it under my arm. Get proof before you give them a performance, he reminded me. I'm not performing. Good. Then don't let them provoke you. When I arrived, everyone was already seated. Evelyn sat at one end of the table with Alyssa beside her. Quentin was across from them. Reed sat near the corner, looking like he had been invited to observe a problem that had nothing to do with him. There was an empty place for me. The food had already been served, but no one was eating. Alyssa's eyes were red. Evelyn held her hand. That told me the story had already been told, just not the true one. I sat down and placed the envelope beside my plate. Evelyn spoke first. We all love Leo. So do I. Then you need to think about what your actions are doing to him. My actions. Alyssa wiped her cheek. You violated our family because you couldn't handle your own insecurity. There it was. The backup story. The version of me they had prepared years earlier. Quentin leaned back in his chair. You took a secret DNA test. That's not normal. Neither is secretly authorizing another man to pick up my son from school. Reed looked down. Evelyn squeezed Alyssa's hand. Some truths do more harm than good, she said softly. I opened the envelope. A real father wouldn't need proof, she added. I placed the lab report in the center of the table. A real family wouldn't need 6 years of lies. Nobody moved. Alyssa said, Jasper, don't. You invited me here. To talk. No. You invited me here to shame me into silence. I took out the first screenshot. This is Alyssa telling Evelyn. Jasper can never find out. He would leave. Quentin shifted in his chair. I placed down the next page. This is Evelyn telling Alyssa to keep Reed away from school because I was asking questions. Evelyn's mouth opened. I didn't let her redirect. This is the school pickup authorization with Reed's name. I put it beside the messages. These are bank transfers from Reed to Alyssa around Leo's birthdays and medical appointments. Reed finally looked at me. This isn't the place, he muttered. I met his eyes. You all made every room in this family a place to lie about me. This is the first room where I'm telling the truth. The silence after that was different. Before, silence had protected them. Now it exposed them. I placed the birthday cards on the table. Our little champ, I read. Proud of you every day. Reed rubbed his jaw. I cared about him. You cared comfortably. That's not fair. You sent gifts. You showed up for cake. You let me handle fevers, bills, school forms, nightmares, discipline, and every hard conversation. Then you took private pieces of fatherhood whenever it suited you. I didn't know what my place was. You knew exactly what your place was. It was close enough to feel important and far enough to avoid responsibility. Alyssa whispered, stop. I turned to her. No, you told these people I was jealous and dangerous when insecure, didn't you? She looked at Evelyn. That was enough. I continued. You built a version of me they could use if I ever found out. I was scared of what you'd do. What did I do? She blinked. I got a test. I hired a lawyer. I kept paying the bills. I made sure Leo didn't hear us fight. I asked for mediation. You canceled our trip. Yes, because our anniversary is not the emergency here. Quentin pointed toward the documents. I didn't know all of that. I looked at him. You knew enough to laugh at me. His hand dropped. Evelyn started crying. I was protecting that little boy. You taught him to erase my name from a school worksheet. I did not. He said you told him he mixed up dad words. Her face changed. It was small, but everyone saw it. I leaned forward. Did you tell him Reed was his real dad? No. I said families can have different kinds of fathers. He is 6. I was trying to prepare him. You were trying to prepare the lie without telling me. Alyssa's voice cracked. Mom, what did you say to him? Evelyn turned toward her. Nothing he couldn't understand. For the first time that evening, Alyssa looked at her mother with something other than dependence. You talked to him without telling me? Evelyn's tears came harder. I was trying to help. That was the thing about people who justify control as protection. Eventually, they start controlling each other. Reed pushed his chair back. I think I should go. No, I said. You should hear the rest. He stopped. If you want a role in Leo's life, you will not get it through secret gifts, private pickups, or Evelyn's back door. You will establish paternity properly. You will accept whatever responsibilities come with the rights you think you deserve. You will participate in counseling and follow professional guidance about what Leo is told and when. Reed's face tightened. You don't get to dictate everything. You're right. That's what the legal process is for. He had no answer to that. I turned to Evelyn. You will not be alone with Leo until you can respect boundaries and stop discussing adult secrets with him. She stared at me. You can't take my grandson away. I am not taking anyone away. I am stopping you from using him to manage this family's image. Then I looked at Alyssa. Our marriage is not being decided tonight. But any conversation about its future requires a complete timeline, counseling, mediation, legal clarity, and an end to secret contact. She shook her head. You're making demands like I'm some criminal. I'm setting conditions for access to the life you lied to keep. She looked around the table, waiting for someone to rescue her. No one did. Quentin stared at his plate. Reed stood with both hands gripping the back of his chair. Evelyn cried into a napkin, but this time her tears didn't control the room. I gathered the originals and left the copies on the table. At the door, Alyssa followed me. Are you leaving me? I'm leaving dinner. Jasper. I will not punish Leo for what you did. She looked relieved again. Then I finished. But I will not protect you from what you did either. The next few weeks were ugly in quieter ways. There were lawyer appointments, scheduling emails, and long stretches where Alyssa and I spoke only about Leo. Reed submitted to a formal paternity test. The result confirmed he was Leo's biological father. That ended his ability to hide behind uncertainty. It also began the part he had avoided for 6 years, real responsibility. He could no longer show up as the fun family friend with a wrapped gift and leave before bedtime. Every discussion about future involvement included obligations, consistency, counseling, and the effect on Leo. He seemed less enthusiastic once fatherhood came with paperwork and accountability. Evelyn did not see Leo alone. She complained to relatives that I was using access as leverage, but I kept every message and followed the counselor's recommendations. When she sent me a long email about forgiveness, I replied with 3 sentences. Respect the boundaries. Stop discussing paternity with Leo. Future contact will follow the counselor's guidance. Quentin never gave me a real apology. He sent one text. I shouldn't have said some of that stuff. I replied. No, you shouldn't have. That was the end of it. Alyssa began counseling because it was one of the conditions for any meaningful discussion between us. During mediation, she gave a fuller timeline. She and Reed had slept together several times during a period when she and I were struggling, but still together. When she found out she was pregnant, she knew the dates overlapped. Evelyn convinced her not to test because I was, in her words, the better long-term choice. Reed knew he might be the father. He agreed not to claim Leo openly as long as he could remain nearby. Alyssa told herself she was preserving stability. Then every year made the truth harder to admit. The more I trusted her, the more she had to lose. So she protected herself by teaching everyone that my questions were the real danger. Hearing her admit it did not bring relief. It made the betrayal more precise. One night, after a counseling session, Alyssa sat at the kitchen table while I packed Leo's lunch. I did love you, she said. I kept spreading peanut butter. That isn't the same as telling the truth. I thought if you knew, you'd leave. You took away my chance to decide. I know. You also took away Leo's chance to learn the truth safely. Now he has to learn it because the adults around him couldn't keep their story straight. She started crying. This time, I didn't argue and I didn't comfort her. I closed the lunchbox and put it in the refrigerator. The child counselor helped us prepare a simple, age-appropriate explanation. No details about the affair. No blame placed on Leo. No promises about what the family would look like later. Before we could have that conversation properly, Leo heard enough fragments to understand that something was wrong. He came into the hallway one evening wearing dinosaur pajamas. Alyssa and I had been talking in the kitchen, quietly, but not quietly enough. He stood near the doorway and looked at both of us. Is Reed my dad? Alyssa went pale. I crouched in front of him. Reed helped make you, I said carefully. But I'm the dad who has raised you, and I love you. He frowned, trying to fit the words together. Like two dads. Something like that. We're going to talk about it with someone who helps families explain big things. He looked at Alyssa. Did you know? She knelt beside me. Yes, she whispered. For how long? She started to answer, then stopped. Leo's eyes moved from her to me. Did everybody know except Dad? Alyssa broke. Not the careful crying she did when she wanted someone to take her side. She folded over and covered her face. Leo looked scared, so I pulled him against me. You didn't do anything wrong, I told him. None of this is your fault. He wrapped his arms around my neck. Are you still my dad? Yes. I answered before Alyssa could breathe. Yes, I am. That was the clearest answer I had in the entire situation. The rest was harder. Alyssa and I did not reconcile. Not then, and not in the months that followed. We separated with legal guidance and built a temporary parenting arrangement that protected Leo's routines while the larger issues were addressed. I kept taking him to school. He still came to me after bad dreams. Sunday pancakes continued, though sometimes they happened in a different kitchen. Reed began supervised, gradual contact under professional guidance. It was awkward and inconsistent at first. Leo knew him already, but knowing someone as a family friend was not the same as understanding that he was a biological parent. Reed had wanted emotional ownership without disruption. Now every choice he made mattered. When he missed an agreed meeting, it was documented. When he wanted more access, responsibility came with it. When he complained that the process felt cold, I told him. Secrecy made this necessary. Evelyn eventually sent a written apology. It was not perfect. Half of it still explained why she believed she had done the right thing. I did not accept it as closure. I told her that contact with Leo would depend on consistent behavior, not one letter. Alyssa asked more than once whether there was any path back for us. I gave her the same answer. There is a path to becoming honest. That does not guarantee a path back to me. She hated that answer because it was one thing she could not control. I still had angry days. There were mornings when I looked at Leo and saw Reed in his expression, then hated myself for noticing. There were nights when I replayed every joke, every strange silence, every moment Alyssa told me I was broken for seeing what everyone else already knew. But I never let that anger land on Leo. He was not evidence. He was not punishment. He was a child who had been handed a family story written by adults who cared more about keeping their positions than telling the truth. I could not undo that. What I could do was stop helping them maintain it. I stopped paying for appearances. I stopped attending dinners designed to pressure me. I stopped explaining my pain to people committed to misunderstanding it. I kept the records. I followed the legal advice. I showed up for my son. That was my answer to all of them. I didn't stop being Leo's dad when I read the DNA test. I stopped being my wife's safety net when I realized she had built our family on a lie. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.